Hey guys, sorry I can't be in class today, so I'm going to try something different and just do a video of my presentation. So to begin with, I just wanted to ask the class, have you guys ever heard of something called heart rate variability biofeedback training? And Jody's going to give us an answer for you guys.
I have not.
No. Okay. So, although a lot of you probably haven't necessarily heard of that name, what it really is just our ability to control our heart rate by lowering our heart rate and also controlling that variability of time between each beat. So when people are trying to do this, they're trying to aim for a cardiac coherence, which means just having a consistent variability of time between each of the heartbeats. This type of training is used a lot within people who have psychological or physiological diseases. A lot of athletes do use this. It hasn't been widely tested, which is what my presentation is going to focus on. And also it's been shown to have a lot of beneficial outcomes, such as helping people increase that connectivity between the amygdala and between the medial prefrontal cortex, which obviously has an emotional regulation component. So basically, in theory, what this is trying to say, and what this line of research is really looking at, is that bidirectional relationship between our brain and our heart. And as we perceive psychological stressors, our body has a physiological response. So the idea is, can we use that physiological response? Can we have control over that physiological response to lower our psychological response that we're having? And the answer is yes. So how my researchers looked to prove this was they created a research project that took in individuals who were athletes, and they created a training group and a non-training group, obviously. And within the training group, they had those that were training for 5 weeks, learning how to control their heart rate variability. And what they did was every single day, twice a day, they would practice this, and they did that with a machine that was provided for them. And they did it for about 5 minutes every single day. And baseline, their HRV scores were collected, as well as their psychological test scores were collected. And then 5 weeks passed, and they went into their first examination that they were doing at university. And what they found was that the control group and the training group had the same scores, or around the same scores, for their psychological tests. But for their HRV scores, the training group tested a lot better, which makes sense according to the fact that they had been training for the last 5 weeks. Moving forward, for about 12 weeks in advance, they had stopped doing the training after that 5 weeks, and then they just went on for their regular ways of coping with stress and test stress. And what they found was, when they got to their final exam, which is probably the most stressful period for a lot of students, the HRV of the individuals who had previously been in that training group at the start of their semester, their anxiety scores were much lower, and their HIV scores remained consistent at this point, whereas that control group, their anxiety scores were the same as the exam one, and their HRV obviously hadn't improved at all. So what this is telling us is that basically the ability to control your breathing and the ability to control that variance in time between each of those heartbeats is allowing for that psychological stress caused by the exam periods to be lowered, and this also is able to remain consistent over a long time period. So I think with this class, we tend to get a little bit too caught up. Well, we don't get too caught up in, but we do get caught up in with feeling that stress is toxic and stress does horrible things, and it's easy to talk about the negative things, which stress is really negative. But with that being said, we also have the ability to control it, and little bits of stress for us is good, and we know that. So this study is really, and just kind of closing the course off, saying that we are able to control our stress. We're able to control that physiological response we have to stress, and in turn help us better cope with future life stressors that we do have. So that's my take home for this week. And then Jody does have a question that she will ask.
Yeah, why did the training not produce any positive results during exam 1?
That's a really good question. So originally they did suspect that during this exam period that training group would still have better anxiety trait scores than the non-control group, just based on 5 weeks of training, and it didn't show this. And so they kind of thought that maybe this was because of the fact that the amygdala still was having a profound influence on the autonomic central circulatory network. And the idea behind that is that later on, over the course of that 12 weeks, that eventually went away, and that you saw the decrease in the anxiety in comparison to the control groups. Awesome. Thank you guys. Good luck with the rest of your presentations.